Now, Mike, I want to talk about the free agency so far. We're about day 3 into this, and some teams have clearly emerged as some winners or some losers. Now, I want to start off with the obvious, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They signed Christian Kirk for 4 years, 84 with incentives, 72 overall. Evan Engram, Brandon Scherf for 3 for 49, 49.5 with 30 that guaranteed. Zay Jones, 3 for 24, 30 with incentives. Darius Williams, 3 for 30, 18 guaranteed. Foyesade Alukun and Fularunzu Fatukasi. Now, I want to start off with you. What are your thoughts on the Kirk signing? That's the one that jumps out to me.
I think we're all in agreement, literally everybody on Twitter, that the Jaguars had the worst offseason. And it all starts with that Christian Kirk signing. Like, he became the 3rd highest paid receiver in the NFL. And sure, the contract doesn't look as bad as when it was first reported, but it's still really bad for a player who's probably a number 2
and
number
never had
3
1,000
receiver.
yards in his career.
Had 4 100-yard games in 4 seasons, and this was his best season last year, and that's mainly because DeAndre Hopkins was hurt. Sure, it's an improvement on the receivers Trevor Lawrence is working with last year, but it's a massive overpay, and it really harms their ability to improve at other positions.
Yeah, I mean, they lost DJ Chark, so they had to replace him in some way with Kirk and Zay Jones and Evan Engram. But Kirk is just, you could have gotten Amari Cooper, as we know now, for about a 4th and a 5th, or just a 5th in general. But you give Kirk 4 years with 84 potentially over that time span, when you could have gotten Amari Cooper for, what was it, like $2 more million a year?
Yeah, $2 million.
Something for a 5th round pick, a proven wide receiver, a top 5 route runner, probably, maybe even top 3 behind Jay Jettas and Devontae Adams. I mean,
for a young quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, the thing that would help him the most is a receiver who can get open. Because even young quarterbacks, like, you're not really going to miss someone who's that wide open. And that's what Amari Cooper does best. And he has a big contract, but it's kind of easy to get out of. It's like, even if it all went to hell, it wouldn't be a huge disaster. It was worth a shot, in my opinion.
Exactly. And I want to get into the Brandon Scherf, though. I think that was a great signing. That was definitely their best signing, because I think Brandon Scherf's one of the best offensive guards in the game. I don't think that's really debatable. But still, it's hefty. It's 3 years for 49.5. I mean, only 30 of it's guaranteed, but still, you're getting one of the best guards in the league. Although it's a lot of money, you really help out your young quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, 1st overall pick. And one thing I also want to get into is the 1st overall pick they have this year. Do they go with Evan Neal still at number 1? Or do you think they go with Hutchinson?
I think you can't really go wrong with either one. But if you really want to help out Trevor Lawrence, Brandon Scherf is great, but he is a guard, which, I think just solidifying that offensive line would do wonders for Lawrence.
Oh, 100%.
You could go after some edge players later on.
Plus, they still have Josh Allen, the defensive end, and they brought in Foyesade Alukun, who's, an inside linebacker, but he can always help out on defense in general. And one thing that also helps with their pick towards Neal is the improvement in the secondary with Darius Williams, because if you have a better secondary, it's harder to really – well, sorry, let me rephrase that. If you have a good defensive line, you could have a worse secondary, but it doesn't really flip-flop, right? If you have a good secondary, it doesn't really help your defensive line, because, like, someone's going to get open no matter what. Even if you have Stephon Gilmore, Jalen Ramsey, and Jair Alexander as your 3 corners, someone's going to get open no matter what at some point.
You can only hold it for so long.
Yeah. So I think no matter what, their pick stays with Evan Neal, but I think that they should go Hutchinson potentially, because they only have Josh Allen, who is a fine player, but he's nothing special. I think he's proven.
Right.
He's had some good moments, but he's definitely a starter in this league. But I think Hutchinson would help them the most. But if you want to, what I think they should do is draft Hutchinson. What they will and also should do is help Trevor Lawrence, because it really depends on which way you look at it. If you want to look at it from the pleasing your young quarterback or helping improve the team for the better for the future. You know what I mean?
So that's exactly what I said. I can't fault them for whatever route they choose, because they're both great players.
And one thing I also want to get into is the Evan Engram usage, because we've heard a lot of reports of teams potentially seeing him as a slot receiver. Now, his hands are obviously still an issue. I don't know your thoughts on Evan Engram. I don't think he's a good player anymore. He had potential, but I just don't think he's good. I think he's actually very bad. But what was his contract? Do you know off the top of your head?
It was a cheap 1-year deal, so I don't hate it, but it's worth a flyer for a guy
100%.
who's talented. But I'm not expecting
what's your
much.
receiver core then? It's Kirk, Marvin Jones, Zay Jones, Laviska Shenault, Evan Engram, Dan Arnold.
I'm really curious to what their plan is because Evan Engram, Christian Kirk, Laviska Shenault, and Dan Arnold, they all, I think I saw this on Twitter, they all ran 40% of their routes from the slot. So they might just be running 4 slants all the time. And Zay Jones was even like near 30% from the slot. So I'm just more curious than anything really to see what they're going to do. But Evan Engram, when he was signed, he said that he really wanted to play with Doug Peterson because of how he's developed tight ends with, he had Zach Ertz when he had over 100 catches in 2018. He was an assistant coach with the Eagles when Brent Selleck had his breakout years. And then he was there in Kansas City when Travis Kelce broke out. So I'm not expecting much, but I can see what they're trying to do.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Doug Peterson's always been good at that, honestly. But, I mean, he's also Doug Peterson, so we're going to have to see how that actually goes. But I want to move on from the Jaguars, and I want to talk about the Patriots first, and then we'll get into your favorite team after that. So the Patriots have been silent, and as a Patriots fan, as you can barely see with that poster right there, they haven't done anything. We re-signed James White to 2 years, like 4.5, whatever it was.
Something really cheap.
Yeah. Cool, right? He missed all last year. I mean, James White's I love him as a Pats fan. He's a culture guy. He's a really good player. And we brought in Terrence Mitchell at corner, okay, sure. Rotational piece. The two that I want to talk about, that I don't want to talk about, but I have to. We traded Shaq Mason for a 5th-round pick to the Buccaneers and Tom Brady. Tom Brady got a guy who, I'm into my mic for a reason. Tom Brady got a guy who protected him for 5 years for free. He's very comfortable with him. I'm not happy with that. Shaq Mason is a top 10 offensive guard in the league. Why? We could have gotten like a 3rd-round pick, maybe even a 2nd for him. Maybe. That might be a stretch. I don't know. I don't know his actual trade value, but that just hurt because now we have Wynn, Owenawu, David Andrews, Trent Brown, and I can't think of our other guard right now. But yeah, that's, unless I just am being very idiotic, I can't think of the other guard right now. So that leaves us with a hole. But if you want to find that out for me while I get into this next point.
And
the Shaq Mason trade trash.
Isn't Trent Brown a free agent too?
Shut up. I don't even want to get into that right now. So the next thing I want to talk about is JC Jackson just refusing to resign with us. We offered him a deal very similar to the Chargers deal, but I don't think it lined up with the amount of years as well. But the finances were there. But how do we let JC Jackson walk? He's he was like our best player last year, clearly, him or Judon. I don't think that's a debate. But I also do understand it from one perspective. He apparently isn't the best guy and isn't the best teammate. What I've heard, like he was always late to stuff, would miss like the charity events and things like that from reports I heard. So, I mean, that stuff's not great, but as a player, we needed JC because we don't have like a solidified cornerback group as we used to have. I mean, we have Jonathan Jones, who missed a lot of games last year. We have the potential in Sean Wade. We have Terrence Mitchell apparently now. And besides that, it's like, okay, Miles Bryant. I don't want to see him touch a football field ever again after what happened in the Bills games. Literally, Gabriel Davis got torched. Torched everyone in our secondary, specifically Miles Bryant. That was actually Isaiah McKenzie who torched Miles Bryant in the 2nd regular season game. That one was brutal. I don't think you understand. Watching that game, me and all my friends were like, why is Miles Bryant on the field? But that's the problem. Speaking of receivers, we are yet to even attempt to speak with a wide receiver. That's probably false, but you know what I mean. Allen Robinson just on the Bears today. Like, why? I mean, the Rams. He was just on the Bears. You know what I meant. Why Rams? Why do you have to do this to me? Just give us Allen Robinson. You don't need him. You don't have him right now, but you had Odell. I saw your tweet earlier. I mean, you said one of the best receiver groups with Kupp, Woods, Robinson, Van Jefferson. It's the best in my opinion. I mean, you got the Bucs when they had AB, but now they don't. So how do we let Allen Robinson go to the Rams? That was the number one guy I wanted. Now it's Odell, maybe Juju. I mean, I'll get into someone later that was just released, but
there aren't really any game changers left now. You're gonna have to look towards the draft.
Odell, but he's coming off a torn ACL. He's had some down years. I mean, he played well for the Rams when he was signed, but he's had some inconsistent years as of late. So, what do you think the Patriots should do with that?
Like I said, you got to look towards the draft for receivers, but with their history, like,
we are not taking a receiver first round.
So, like, I don't know what their plan is going forward at receiver because like we said, there aren't many left, and you can't go to the draft. So, are we just going to have another year?
I mean, we could try in like the second round because first round wide receivers clearly have not been our thing over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Insert N'Keal Harry. But I definitely think we should go corner first round. That's just my opinion. Maybe linebacker too, depending if we don't sign anyone. But now,
I would say corner probably.
Yeah, most likely corner. Because, I mean, linebacker, we have some depth, but at corner, we have Jonathan Jones, and that's it. Let's talk about a team that potentially has done worse than the Jaguars, but in a different way. See, the Jaguars just brought in a lot of pieces and overpaid. But everyone's favorite, America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. Let's talk about what they've done. Let's do a quick list. They traded Amari Cooper for a 5th-round pick, correct? Mm-hmm. Not getting the picks mixed up. They cut La'el Collins today. Today's Thursday, by the way. They let Connor Williams walk to the Dolphins.
Dolphins, correct.
They didn't sign any defensive linemen like a Von Miller. Oh, and speaking of that, Randy Gregory, whatever they try to do, screw him over with the contract later after he agreed to it. No, he was just like, no, I'm not doing it anymore. And he walked. But hey, they re-signed Amani Hooker. They let Cedric Wilson walk, which was terrible considering the fact that they traded Amari Cooper.
It was a decent deal too that he signed with Miami.
Yeah, right. It wasn't bad for the Dolphins. Wasn't bad for Cedric Wilson. The Cowboys easily could have matched that. But then they signed Michael Gallup to 5-year, 57 with 27 guaranteed. Good deal for him, even though he's coming off a very bad injury. They re-signed DeMarcus Lawrence for 3 years for 40 with 30 that guaranteed. And they tagged Dalton Schultz, which I personally do not like. And I'll get into that in a second. I want to start off with Dalton Schultz, and then you can get into some of the other signings. I don't like the tagging of Dalton Schultz because he's a good player, but he's a possession tight end. And then they cut their blocking tight end, who, yes, was injured all last year, in Blake Jarwin. I don't like it because he only had one good year. You know, we haven't seen much out of Dalton Schultz prior to this season. So how are you going to pay him? Is it top 5 or top 10 average? Franchise tag. Well, whatever it is, it's like 10 million.
Yeah, it's 10 million though.
He's not worth 10 million to me. Yes, he did very well and was really one of the top targets on the team and played his role perfectly. But with his inability, or not as great of an ability to block as players such as Blake Jarwin, I think it really hurts their run game a little bit by tagging him, giving him so much money. And I just don't like that move at all, personally. I think you could have re-signed him like a 2-year, $16 million deal. I think that would have been a good deal for him. Hey, maybe they're trying to do that, you know? Maybe that's what they're trying to do. But as the current franchise tag salary stands, not a fan.
I'm not as negative on it as you are, but it is kind of confusing because tight end is one of the lower paid franchise tags, so it's not as egregious a hit on the cap as if he was some other position. But This also means they're probably trying to sign him to a long-term deal. So, like you said, I wouldn't commit that much to re-sign him. And like you said, he's only had one good year, but he's a young player, so I guess they could see, he's got potential to grow from there, but there's really nothing proving to say that for sure. But as for some of their other signings, the DeMarcus Lawrence one, that was a home run. Loved it for both him and the team. It was just 3 years, $40 million with $30 million guaranteed. He's had elite PFF grades for like 5 years straight. So that was when they announced that signing. I was like, okay, the Cowboys are doing well. And then, everything else came dropping in. Michael Gallup, I wasn't a great fan at first, but then compared to some of the other receiver deals, like, okay, I can buy into that. But the Amari Cooper one is where I'm just really confused, because at face value, it's like, it's not terrible based on his contract, but they let it leak that they were going to cut him. And that's why
you got traded for nothing.
Yeah. So they're really competing against themselves this whole offseason with Lyle Collins and with Randy Gregory. So it's like you said, it's completely different than the Jaguars, but they're still just screwing themselves with their own mistakes.
Yeah. Now the Cooper one, I mean, that's just really bad. The Lyle Collins. My least favorite one is the Randy Gregory one, just because of everything that happened that led to that. They resigned him, and they was like, no, you guys messed up my contract with, the Cowboys, Jerry Jones, whoever did it, purposely.
Too cute.
Yeah, exactly.